Welcome to Season 4 of Mountain Tough. In this season, the Rocky Mountains are at the end of autumn, already dressed in a snowy coat, a bad sign indicating a colder winter ahead. This makes life harder for the residents. With the hunting season arriving, Tom is busy at work. Fur is his livelihood. Today, he unexpectedly got a deerskin, a normally joyous occasion. However, the scene at home raised his blood pressure. Something shattered the glass outside his warehouse, and inside was a mess, tools scattered and stored furs ruined. Evidence suggested a black bear was responsible, angering Tom. He estimated the damages to be in the thousands of dollars, worsening his already tough financial situation. Tom was furious and would have confronted the bear if he wasn't slightly rational. He figured the bear was attracted by two unprocessed furs and the absence of his dog, Ellie, and wife, Nancy. The early winter also played a role, as bears need to stock up before hibernation. With food already scarce, the harsh winter made the bear bold. Since hunting bears was not an option, Tom had to find ways to prevent further incidents or scare it away. The bear intrusion not only cost Tom money, but also much time. After a quick cleanup, Tom processed the furs to remove all meat and fat to prevent attracting more bears, throwing the fat as far away as possible. Venturing deep into the woods, Tom remained cautious, never knowing what danger might arise. Hence, he carried a shotgun. However, the feared encounter happened. Spotting a dark figure, Tom realized it was the bear. In a rage, he charged with his fire stick, ready for a showdown, startling the bear into fleeing. Though Tom's action was brave, he regretted it after calming down. Fortunately, bears are usually timid around humans. To prevent future incidents, Tom needed effective measures. Meanwhile, in the isolated Alaskan Revelation Mountains, another man was busy gathering wood to build a unique wilderness cabin. This man was fur trapper Marty. Last winter, Marty came to this unfamiliar territory to homestead and reaped a rich reward. This year, he returned early to build a permanent residence to facilitate prolonged hunting stays. Marty has been here a week, and the basic structure of the house is taking shape. Those who watched Season 2 may remember Marty and his apprentice building a small cabin, which was quite exhausting for them. Now, Marty is building this cabin alone, which is considerably more challenging. Marty is selective about his timber, choosing logs about 25 centimeters thick and only straight spruce trees. Once he finds the right ones, he cuts them down. Before transporting, he processes them because they're too long and heavy to move alone. The processed timber is then moved to a portable sawmill for secondary processing. Powered by Marty's chainsaw, the logs are cut to have 3 flat sides and then installed on the wooden walls. The complexity of this method mainly stems from the lack of help, as it would be impossible for him to secure the logs onto the walls alone without flattening them. Marty isn't particular about the cabin's appearance. His main concern is its insulation, as winters here are exceptionally cold. With the Alaskan winter approaching and daylight hours decreasing, Marty needs to finish the cabin quickly. The chainsaw is one of his most essential tools, but it occasionally malfunctions, such as when the chain gets stuck. However, Marty, being experienced, easily fixes these issues. Suddenly, a fierce wind begins, causing trees to sway dangerously. Marty's first thought is that a dust storm is approaching, so he rushes to check on his airplane, which could be flipped by the storm. As the only means of transportation in and out of the area, he cannot afford to be stranded here. The plane is parked on a nearby clearing, swaying in the strong winds, but luckily not in the storm's center, so Marty is not overly worried. Yet this sudden change in weather is a concern. The storm disrupted Marty's plans. He was supposed to fly home today, as the hunting season is near, and his hunting gear is still at home. With his supplies running low and flight impossible under current conditions, Marty decided to pack his luggage and planned to fly back home first thing tomorrow, hoping the storm would have ceased by then. Black bears not only attack but also raid homes. Since hunting them is not allowed now, Tom had to defend passively. He called his friend Will to help secure his warehouse. They boarded up the windows and installed bolts on the wooden door, preparing for the bear's hibernation. They also placed nail mats at the warehouse door and beneath the windows. If the bear returned, these nails would deter it. As the weather grew colder and snow covered the land, days passed, and Nancy and Ellie returned home. This morning, Tom and his wife discovered fresh bear tracks in the snow, indicating the persistent bear had visited again. They followed the tracks to the warehouse and saw many footprints on the nail mats, suggesting the bear suffered there last night. Tom believed the bear, having learned its lesson, wouldn't return, allowing him to safely process the furs again. Due to the bear's damage, many of his tools were destroyed, including his fleshing knife, essential for removing excess fat and hair from furs. Unable to process the furs without it, Tom decided to craft a new one. He had a blade ready. It just needed some sharpening. For the handle, he chose a sturdy part of a deer antler, which is similar to bone and tough to work with. He then attached the blade to the handle using deer hide strings he had soaked in advance for durability. The deer skin, brought back the day the bear broke into his warehouse, was a valuable find. Properly processed, it could be worth at least $800, helping offset some of his losses. First, he scraped off the excess fat and then the hair. Processing required careful control to avoid puncturing the thinner parts of the skin, which could have its value. Thus, Tom had to be meticulous throughout the process. After cleaning the skin, the next step was tanning, typically using a brain tanning method. The brain tanning method involves boiling an animal's brain in water and mashing it, then applying it to the hide. This makes the hide very soft, durable, and waterproof. After covering the entire hide with the mixture, it just needs to dry completely. In the Revelation Mountains of Alaska, Marty originally planned to fly home the next day after the storm. However, strong winds persisted, forcing him to wait until the third day. Fortunately, the winds finally ceased today, restoring peace in the valley. Marty now needs to hurry back home to collect all the necessary tools for trapping, as the hunting season is about to start. Despite the calm in the valley, the canyon he must fly through remains perilous, which Marty has dubbed Hell's Gate, due to its constant strong winds that shake his small plane dangerously, making every trip a race against death. To avoid the strong winds, Marty had a bold idea to fly at a very low altitude, about 4 meters off the ground, after entering the valley. This risky maneuver placed him amidst more hazards. Low flying is hard to control, and the numerous obstacles could prove fatal if not spotted in time. The flight went smoothly, and Marty was nearing the exit. He then ascended to fly between two mountain peaks, avoiding the strongest winds. Fortunately, no sudden gusts occurred, and Marty safely passed through Hell's Gate. A few hours later, Marty landed smoothly on his own runway. With only 3 days at home before the hunting season begins, he has to finish building his hunter's cabin and establish new hunting routes urgently. Marty also arranged for his wife and child to join him in the mountains in a month, planning for their wilderness survival. In these 3 days, Marty needs to prepare for the month ahead for his family, having already stocked the refrigerator with plenty of meat. Now he just needs to gather some firewood for daily use. Marty's preparation, much like Tom's, is meticulous and thorough. Marty manages all major and minor tasks at home himself, and both he and his friend pamper their wives greatly. In the following days, Marty takes his daughter to gather firewood. Once they have enough, he plans to transport a large amount of hunting gear to his hunting grounds. As long as it fits, Marty doesn't hesitate to load his plane. You might wonder why he doesn't stay a few more days to spend time with his family. Marty would like to, but he can't afford to delay. With the approach of winter, daylight hours in Alaska are dwindling. His hunting cabin is still unfinished, and he needs to establish a new hunting trail. With the hunting season drawing near, Marty worries about running out of time, prompting his early return to the Revelation Mountains to set up the new hunting trail. For this trip, Marty has brought a large number of traps, enough to set up a 40-kilometer-long hunting line. To prevent a repeat of a previous wolf intrusion, he's also brought several large traps. Additionally, he has stocked up on plenty of fuel, indicating his plans for a major expedition this year. After loading everything onto his plane, Marty bids farewell to his wife and child. However, the separation is brief as they will join him in a month. As the plane roars to life, Marty heads back to the harsh wilderness. With several trips under his belt, he is increasingly familiar with the route, and the journey goes smoothly. However, as the hunting season approaches, Marty faces a serious issue. It's early winter, but there's not a trace of snow on the ground. Unusual, as it should be covered in snow by now. This anomaly greatly affects his hunting plans, as he relies on snow tracks to locate game. Without snow, his snowmobile is also unusable, putting him in a difficult position. Upon safely landing in the Revelation Mountains, Marty finds that the hunting plans cannot proceed as expected, but this gives him time to work on his cabin. After a night's rest, he begins work on the cabin the next day. He has already constructed the 4 walls and now only needs to complete the roof. However, he faces a challenge: lifting the heavy, long beams to the roof, a task too difficult to handle alone. Despite the difficulty, Marty has no choice but to try. Marty struggled with the beams, as one side lifted while the other dropped, making him feel helpless. After much effort, he managed to get the beam in place and nailed them together. He tested their strength, which proved sufficient. However, considering the frequent snowfall in the area to prevent the beams from collapsing under the weight of the snow, Marty added 2 more for reinforcement, creating a superstructure for the roof. Next, he needed to lay wooden planks for the roofing. First, he trimmed the excess parts from the edges to ensure a tight fit between the boards. He measured a perfect cutting line and removed the surplus parts. This process was very dangerous and could have led to injuries, which would be problematic as there are no doctors nearby. After trimming all 4 corners, all he needed to do was secure the planks, and his hunter's cabin would be complete. In a public hunting area, Tom came alone to stock up on meat for the winter. The area is populated with many deer, and that was Tom's target. Deer are only slightly smaller than moose, with an adult male weighing up to 300 kilograms. Capturing one would suffice for him and Nancy to get through most of the winter. He wore an orange vest to prevent being mistaken for game by other hunters, as this is a public hunting zone with many legally armed hunters. In the wilderness, unexpected situations can arise, and if an accident occurred, the orange vest would help rescuers identify him. One might wonder if such a bright color affects hunting. The answer is yes, but most animals are colorblind, seeing only in black and white, and deer are among them. However, deer have very sensitive smell and hearing, making it difficult to approach them quietly. Also, being heavily hunted at this time of the year, deer become very alert to any disturbances and can disappear quickly. But escaping hunters is nearly impossible for them as they are social animals, and their large groups leave obvious tracks in the snow. Using the tracks left in the snow, Tom quickly deduced the deer's general location. After tracking them for a while, he spotted a group on a hillside ahead. As the deer began to cross the hill, Tom hurried to not miss the opportunity. But as he was rushing towards the hill, a lone deer appeared in his path. Seizing the moment, Tom readied his rifle, even using a portable stand to increase his chances of a successful hunt. However, just as he locked onto the target, an awkward situation occurred. The deer turned its back to him. At this angle, even a hit might only wound the animal, and the gunshot could scare off the nearby herd, causing more harm than good. After some deliberation, Tom decided not to shoot and watched the deer disappear from sight, hoping for another opportunity. Tom continued searching around the hillside for another opportunity. Luckily, the deer herd had not gone far. He spotted a large, foolish-looking deer poking its head out at the top of the hill. Tom quickly raised his rifle as the deer, seemingly confused, looked in his direction. unaware that its fate was about to be sealed. Successfully hunting this deer brought Tom much relief, as it meant he had secured enough meat for the winter. Now, he needed to quickly process the deer, removing and discarding the entrails. A wasteful act, but necessary for Tom. Despite this, the hunt was very profitable for him, yielding a large amount of meat and a valuable deer hide worth hundreds of dollars, plus 2 deer tusks valued at $300 each. The Revelation Mountains welcomed their first snow of the year, alleviating Marty's concerns. His long-awaited hunting moment had finally arrived. Marty's hunting cabin was nearly complete, lacking only a roof. He decided to pause this task to focus on establishing his new hunting line. Marty planned a circular hunting ground centered around his cabin, with an estimated total length of 50 kilometers. To ensure a successful season, he prepared 150 traps for this route, averaging 3 traps per kilometer. Since this area was undeveloped, Marty needed to continually clear new paths, making his upcoming work quite challenging. Marty then started his busy day. Some might wonder how he got his snowmobile there. Before building the cabin, he had dismantled it into parts and transported them by plane for assembly on site. After traveling some distance, Marty found tracks of a marten and decided to set his first trap there. He used the same method, cutting down a small tree, securing it at an angle to another tree, and placing bait at the top with a trap just below. He then smeared some expired chili sauce on it to complete the setup. After setting this first trap, Marty drove to the next location. In this undeveloped jungle, he frequently had to stop and clear obstacles. Time flies when busy, and 4 hours passed quickly. Given the pioneering nature of his work in this jungle, Marty had only set about 20 traps in this time. With daylight dwindling, he decided to call it a day. After a long night, Marty set out early the next morning on his snowmobile to check the traps he had set the previous day, hoping for a surprise catch. Unfortunately, the first trap was empty. Undeterred and maintaining his optimism, Marty moved on to the second trap, but it was also empty. Keeping his hopes up, he quickly checked the rest of the traps he had set the day before, but sadly, none of them had caught anything. Marty began to doubt whether his plan had been overheard by someone, scaring away all the martens. However, his doubts were soon dispelled when he saw a marten hanging quietly in one of his traps. Based on last year's prices, Marty had successfully earned $200. His good fortune didn't end there. When he checked the last trap, he found another marten, bringing his total earnings for the day to $400. As Marty was preparing to return to camp, a line of animal tracks in the snow caught his attention. With his extensive experience, he immediately recognized these as valuable fur-bearing animal tracks, potentially more lucrative than the marten. Clearly, Marty wasn't going to miss this opportunity. Tom, hearing about Marty's success with trapping martens, decided to try his luck as well. After preparing his hunting gear, Tom set off on his snowmobile. Martens usually inhabit higher elevations, so he headed up the mountain. A heavy snowfall the night before had added over 30 centimeters of snow, making the journey especially challenging, particularly on uphill slopes, where the fresh, loose snow made it easy for the snowmobile to get stuck. Fortunately, Tom was strong and managed to free his vehicle quickly. After solving this issue, Tom continued his hunting trip, increasing the throttle to avoid further incidents and navigating over uneven hills until he reached his destination. Upon arrival, Tom was immediately greeted with good news. He found signs of marten activity. He swiftly set up his first trap using a slightly different method than Marty, but the principle was the same. He cut down a small tree, then tied it to another. The main difference was in the sophistication of his trap and bait. Tom used rotting beaver meat placed deep inside a box, with the trap set at the entrance. Any animal trying to reach the bait would surely get caught. Additionally, to attract more prey, he added extra bait, a piece of rotting deer skin smeared with a concoction of pungent ingredients. Tom even went as far as burning the bait with a Chinese brand lighter to spread the intense smell, which was so strong that he had to cover his nose with a handkerchief. It seemed likely that Tom's trap would have a higher success rate. Time flew by, and it soon grew dark. Tom managed to set up 12 traps before it was completely dark and had to rush home. He planned to return the next day to check the traps. After a night's rest, Tom was back on his snowmobile early in the morning, full of hope as he approached the first trap. From a distance, he could see it was empty, but he got off his vehicle to take a closer look, just to make sure. Seeing no signs of capture, Tom pressed his face close for a final, detailed inspection. Confirming it was indeed empty, he reluctantly drove away. Although Tom's first trap was empty, he remained confident in his trapping skills. However, as his confidence was high, so was his disappointment. The next few traps were also empty, dealing a heavy blow to the seasoned hunter. Despite feeling very dejected, Tom did not give up on checking his traps. It was not until he reached the last trap that he finally saw a glimmer of hope: a marten quietly hanging in the trap. Excited, Tom immediately stopped his snowmobile and rushed over. Holding the young adult marten, Tom noted that catching such a young animal indicated a healthy ecosystem in the area. If it had been an older marten, it would suggest the ecosystem was deteriorating, and he would need to find a new hunting spot. So, if Tom persisted, he could potentially earn a good income from this area, with the marten's fur valued at $500. Meanwhile, Marty was looking for ways to make some extra money. Recently, an unsuspecting animal had wandered into his hunting area, and today, Marty decided to target it. However, unlike the marten, this animal did not prefer carrion, so the bait used previously for martens was not the best choice. Marty planned to find more appealing bait for this animal. Since it did not have a keen sense of smell, relying on strongly scented bait would not work. Instead, its vision was very sharp, so Marty needed to exploit this trait. Its favorite food was lean meat, but fresh rabbit meat was unavailable in the area. Marty decided to use another Alaskan delicacy, the grouse, as a substitute. Grouse typically feed on tender shoots, seeds, and insects, and are often found near pine trees because of their diet. Due to their small size, Marty switched to a small caliber shotgun to ensure the grouse meat remained intact, as a large caliber shotgun would completely shatter the bird. The grouse's black and white feathers helped it camouflage well in the snowy conditions. Marty scoured the bushes repeatedly, but saw not a single feather. Forced to change locations, he followed a stream forward. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Marty spotted his target, a plump grouse sitting leisurely on a branch, unaware of Marty's approach. Marty didn't give it time to react, and a quick shot took it down. He noticed another grouse on a nearby branch, if his guess was right, suggesting they were likely a pair. So Marty unhesitatingly took it as well, believing that a family should stay together. Not only had he secured bait, but he also had his dinner sorted. While the grouse was still warm, Marty prepared the breast meat for dinner and saved the rest for setting traps. He then found a suitable spot and began setting up his trap. Marty typically used single compartment traps, and this time was no exception. He constructed a triangular enclosure with branches under a tree, suspended a grouse wing above to attract attention, placed the remaining bait inside at the back, and set a trap at the entrance. Now, do you think Marty will be successful with this setup? After a night's wait, Marty hurried through the forest early the next morning to check his traps. He also checked his marten traps along the way. Marty's luck was good today. The first trap he checked yielded a marten, earning him $200. However, his luck didn't extend to the other traps. After several empty ones, Marty reached his new trap setup and was puzzled to see the trap missing. Following the disordered tracks on the ground, he guessed the prey had dragged it away. He tracked the marks and soon found the unfortunate animal hiding under a tree. To end its suffering, Marty quickly dispatched it with a shot. Holding his prize, Marty felt delighted. He had just earned another $500, totaling $700 for the day. A truly lucky day for Marty. If every day went like this, he could have a very profitable winter. Recently, something brazen targeted Tom's pigeon coop. Angered by the intrusion on his property, the old hunter decided it was time to send a message. Analyzing the footprints left in the snow, Tom identified them as those of a North American mink, an omnivorous animal that preys on virtually anything edible, whether flying, running, or swimming. Tom inspected the pigeon coop, but thankfully, the mink hadn't found a way inside. However, with the mink now targeting the coop, Tom needed to act quickly. Mink are mid-sized, semi-aquatic mammals typically found near rivers, and there was a river close to Tom's home. Following the tracks, Tom soon discovered where the mink was coming from, very close to the pigeon coop. The mink's keen sense of smell made it easy for it to detect the pigeons. Although it hadn't found a way into the coop this time, next time might be a different story. With winter making food scarce, Tom knew the mink would likely return to his pigeon coop. To eliminate this nuisance, Tom decided to use a trap. He returned to his storage to retrieve an old mink trap and bait. Tom planned to use beaver meat as bait and stuffed a lot of pigeon feathers into the trap to lure the mink. But he didn't stop there. He also applied a strong-smelling sauce around the box before setting out with the trap. Tom placed the first trap by the riverbank. If the mink tried to eat the beaver meat inside the box, it would surely be caught by the trap at the entrance. He set the second trap halfway up the hillside as a backup if the first trap failed. To ensure nothing was left to chance, Tom also set a third trap in front of the pigeon coop's door. Tom was determined to rid his property of the mink. Once everything was in place, all he had to do was wait for the mink to fall into his trap. The next day, Tom went to the pigeon coop early in the morning. Unfortunately, this trap was not triggered, and there were no signs of mink activity around it. Wondering if the mink had not visited last night, Tom proceeded to the trap on the hillside, which was also untriggered. Baffled by the same outcome, Tom pinned his hopes on the last trap. When he saw the prey in the trap, Tom realized the mink hadn't made it past the first challenge, explaining why there were no signs of it along the way. Although mink fur isn't very valuable, and despite Tom's expert skinning skills, the mink was worth at most $20. So, Tom was somewhat disdainful, but relieved that his pigeon coop was now safe. Currently, Marty's cabin still lacked a roof to be completely finished. As the date to reunite with his wife approached, Marty decided to pause his hunting activities and focus on finishing the cabin. He dragged the last piece of wood into place, starting a busy day. His plan was to complete the entire roof in one day. Laying the roof required more than 40 logs. To prevent gaps between the boards, Marty had to cut the logs into 3 flat surfaces, a considerable amount of work. After cutting the last board, Marty moved on to the next task. First, he needed to hoist the boards onto the roof. The boards were very thick and heavy, saturated with moisture, weighing at least 100 pounds each. This job would be challenging without considerable strength. Once he ensured the boards wouldn't slide off, Marty climbed up the other side of the roof. In the extreme cold of Alaska, everywhere was covered with a layer of frosty snow, requiring Marty to be extremely careful. He carefully positioned himself by the rafters and nailed down the first board. Using this board as a foothold, he dragged the rest of the boards up from the side of the wooden wall. After repeating this process several times, Marty had a stable footing on the roof, which made the rest of his work much smoother. 2 hours later, the roof was completely finished. Seeing Marty breathe a sigh of relief, it was clear that building the roof had been a strenuous task. However, Marty's work was not yet finished. He brought over a piece of bacon and needed to create an opening in the roof for a smoke vent. After measuring the appropriate size, Marty used a chainsaw to cut the hole. Soon, an opening was made, and he tested it with the end of the bacon. It fit perfectly, which pleased him greatly. Now, only one last task remained: installing a waterproof layer on the roof. Marty started by nailing one corner of the waterproof fabric to the eave, then climbed onto the roof to pull the fabric into place. To prevent it from being blown away by strong winds, he secured it with wooden planks. With this, his roofing work was completely finished. Next, he awaited the arrival of his wife and child. A plane was slowly approaching the valley, and Marty had set out early to meet them. Indeed, his long-awaited wife and child were arriving. As the plane landed smoothly, Marty quickly approached them. After more than a month apart, the Marty family reunited in the desolate Revelation Mountains. They also brought an essential piece of equipment, a custom-made heating stove for the cabin, which would ensure they had a warm home there. After moving the stove onto the snowmobile, his friend's task was completed. After saying goodbye to Marty and his family, his friend left the area. Thus, Marty and his family officially began their wilderness life. He then led his wife and daughter back to the hunter's cabin. To surprise them, Marty had them cover their eyes as they approached the cabin. Despite their mental preparation, they were still amazed when they saw the cabin. They then toured the inside and were impressed by Marty's handiwork. After assembling the stove, Marty and his family officially moved into the new home. February is the coldest month in Alaska, but this year the climate was unusually warm. An unexpected warm current swept through the Revelation Mountains, catching Marty off guard. The snow melted very quickly, which was a bolt from the blue for Marty, who relied on the snow to track game. As the temperature continued to rise, the martins Marty had not yet processed were quickly thawing. He needed to hurry to treat the martin pelts. Otherwise, they would spoil and lead to significant losses. To pass on his skills, Marty took this opportunity to teach his daughter some of his techniques. After hanging the martin pelts, he began his lesson. Processing fur is a delicate task, and care must be taken not to tear the fur. However, there is a law that requires hunters to close their traps at the end of the season to prevent accidentally harming animals during non-hunting times. Closing the traps is relatively simple. It just involves shutting the traps. So, Marty quickly completed this task, turning off all the traps. The chainsaw stand Marty had assembled while building his cabin now needed to be disassembled into parts and stored inside the hunter's cabin. They were finishing up their preparations to return home. Marty had packed everything up, never expecting that overnight, a fresh layer of snow would cover the Revelation Mountains. This situation nearly made Marty curse, as he had already closed the hunting line and reopening it was now impossible. He had to forcibly put an end to his hunting plan. A plane slowly approached from the distance, flown by Marty's friend. Marty needed his help to send his wife and child back home while he loaded supplies and furs. After sending his family off, Marty returned to the cabin. To prevent any wild creatures from entering, Marty boarded up the windows and nailed the door shut. After ensuring everything was secure, he went to the plane, untied the ropes securing the wings, and started the engine. As the engine roared to life, Marty successfully flew towards home, thus prematurely ending his winter hunting season. In the Rocky Mountains Bison Valley, there was only one day left until the end of winter. After today, Tom planned to sell all his furs. However, the current threat left him uneasy. Early in the morning, his friend Will called him to come over and see something. It was an outdoor tent that Will had passed by in the morning, where he found a cooler torn apart with foam scattered around. Will noticed many bear claw marks on the remnants, indicating that a bear had caused the damage. With spring bringing warmer weather and nature slowly reviving, bear cubs were also waking from hibernation. At this moment, they were hungry and roamed around looking for food. The bears were not only greedy, but also highly aggressive at this time. Seeing the bear claw marks on the tent gave Tom a headache. Months ago, a black bear had raided his storage, causing him a loss of several $1,000s, forcing him to rely on his brother for financial help. Now, he had accumulated some furs, hoping to recover financially after the winter. But with the bears waking from hibernation and the previous raid, Tom feared the black bear might return. He needed to hurry back and take some protective measures. His storage was full of Tom's creations from the winter, collectively worth about $10,000, so he couldn't afford any losses. He moved all items inside because a bear's nose is more sensitive than a dog's. This included a garbage can that had contained meat, a basket with bird feathers, and a frame used for scraping animal skins. Essentially, anything with a scent of blood was taken indoors. He then sealed the windows and placed a board full of nails at the bottom. A similar board was placed in front of the door. After ensuring everything was secure, Tom felt relieved enough to leave. As night fell and the temperature rapidly dropped, Tom added some wood to the stove. He planned to spend the night guarding the warehouse. Suddenly, the family dog in the main house barked a few times. Tom quickly asked what was wrong, but Nancy didn't know the reason. Tom speculated that Ellie might have sensed danger, so he quickly asked Nancy to bring the shotgun. Then Tom, holding a flashlight in one hand and the shotgun in the other, began to check around. The surroundings were pitch black under the night sky, and they were both fully alert, not daring to be careless. However, after a full round, they did not find anything. It seemed the black bear might have retreated on its own, but regardless, it looked like they would get through the night safely after a tense and fearful evening. Early the next morning, Tom was busy organizing the furs. Today, he planned to tally them up and then pack them for sale. Nancy came over to help as well. Tom estimated that he could make over $10,000 from these furs. And with that, this episode comes to an end. See you in Season 5.